Welcome, mechanical engineering students. Let's get educated on some very basic and essential information related to the Autodesk Inventor software. The first thing I want to discuss are the different types of files we can create. So if I go to File and New, we see that 4 different items pop up. The most basic or primitive is known as the part file, which has the extension .ipt. And as the name suggests, here you're creating individual piece parts. And for the most part, engineers have to create many parts which eventually come together into something known as an assembly. So an example would be maybe the engine of your car. Your car engine has many complex parts, such as a camshaft, a crankshaft, the pistons, the engine block, and so on. So we could create those individual parts, and then the assembly shows how everything comes together. The next thing we can consider creating is something known as a drawing file. So when you have to have your part made by a machinist or production facility, often we have to have something known as an engineering drawing, which has different views. It might have section views, it might have notes on a surface finish and other annotations showing the different dimensions of our part, and so on and so forth. The last thing we can consider creating is something known as a presentation. And this is not a PowerPoint presentation per se. Rather, it enables other impressive visuals, such as exploded views, to further show your audience how your assembly is coming together or how it works. So let's go ahead and create a part. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to at the top part of the screen, this is known as the ribbon. And the ribbon is comprised of several different tabs. And for the beginner analyst, the 2 most important are probably the Sketch tab and the 3D Model tab. Most of the time, your parts are going to start out as a 2-dimensional sketch. Let's go over a simple example. I'm just going to create a rectangular block. So to do that, I make sure I'm in my Sketch tab, and I'm going to go ahead and select Rectangle. And we have to draw all of our sketches on a plane, and then I'm just going to create this rectangle. And when I'm happy with the rectangle, we're about ready to create our 3D part. Now you might be asking, what do these symbols mean on the screen? These are simply constraints, and we'll cover that in another video which goes into sketching in a bit more detail. But for right now, let's go to 3D Model, and we'll create an extrusion. And I'm just using the default settings for right now. And I'm going to hit OK. So notice that when I created my part, if I come over to the right-hand side, I see something known as the browser window. Now, every time I create a sketch and then a feature, such as an extrusion, we see that this gets added to the browser window. So for example, let's say I wanted to add another extrusion to this face, a circular extrusion to this face. As I create these additions, notice that the browser window will add those features in the order at which I create them. So for example, if I click on circle and then this plane here, I'm just going to create a small circular extrusion using the default settings. Notice that the sketch was first generated, and then when I finish the extrusion, we see that another extrusion was generated. And again, the way that Inventor generates the name and number is the order at which it's created. Now, you can, if you so desire, you can change the extrusion to a custom name. For example, the first one was a block, and the second extrusion was maybe a circular shaft. So you can give it any name that you so desire. Now, the next item I'd like to discuss with you, also on the right side of the screen, is something known as a view cube. So the view cube allows me to change the orientation or perspective of the part on the screen. So here we have something that's known as an isometric view, but what if I want to look at the top side or the bottom side or the front side? I can simply click on the various faces of the view cube and get as much perspective as I want, and if I click the home button, it kind of brings me back to where I started. Now, the other thing you can do is I can left click on my view cube and hold the left mouse button down, and I can move my mouse, and you can see it changes, it kind of rotates my part as I move the view cube. It sort of follows whatever the view cube does, the part does. Now, also on the right side, we have something known as the navigation bar. And again, the navigation bar lets me move the part around. I can make the part big, I can make the part small, I can just move the part without changing its size. That's known as panning. So for example, if I were to left click on this hand icon, which is the pan command, notice that the cursor changes also to a hand symbol. And then if I were to left click and hold it down, I can move the part to the left, to the right, up, down, and so on. Now, what if you want to zoom in? Let's say I wanted to zoom in on the circular feature here. There's several different things I can do. And by the way, there is another video on pan, zoom, and rotate as part of this YouTube channel. But additional zoom commands are found in this drop-down menu here. I can zoom window, zoom selected, or just plain zoom. If I just use the regular zoom command, notice that again the cursor changes, and what I can do is use my center mouse button, which is a scroll wheel, and if I were to move my mouse over to the circular feature and move my scroll wheel around, rotate the scroll, notice that the zoom follows wherever I place my cursor. So if I want to look at this corner here, it gets bigger or smaller as I see fit, and so on and so forth. Clicking the home button always brings me back to sort of this nice isometric view where the entire part is shown on the screen. The next thing I'd like to discuss is how to get help. How do you get more information on these different commands? So for example, if I go to 3D model and then notice that I created different extrusions to create this block and shaft. But let's say I want to get more information on the extrude command. How do I do that? There are several different ways. You can, of course, come up here to help and maybe just type in extrude and see what comes up. Basically, a browser window opens. There's another thing you can do, however, is if you simply leave your mouse on the command, notice this other window opens up, and it has a nice definition explaining the command. And at this point, if you were to strike F1 on your keyboard, a browser window will open up and give you even more information. So let's go ahead and do that. So I simply hit F1, and when I did that, a new browser window opens, and you can see that it's giving me a lot more information on the extrude command. You'll see a lot more information given on all of these different options and sub-options you have. And you can see there's quite a bit of information, including sometimes even some embedded videos or other sketches showing how to toggle different options on or off. And they have this for pretty much every command available in the Inventor software. So this essentially covers what I wanted to review today as far as very essential or basic information. So I hope you found today's video to be both helpful and instructive, and thank you so much for your time and attention.